At first, it looked like just another normal day. People were driving, playing sports, and enjoying the outdoors, going about their lives without any idea that something was about to go terribly wrong. These ordinary moments turned into accidents no one was prepared for. And somehow, what you're seeing right now is not even the most disturbing part of this video. Because the final accident is the one that makes this entire list so hard to forget. But before you're about to see that, let's start with the first terrifying accident. On December 18, 2022, 6 friends were kayaking through the Agua Azul River in Chiapas, Mexico, a route known for a dangerous series of waterfalls called the Five Kings. At first, everything seemed under control. They had already made it through part of the river, and each kayaker was trying to carefully choose their line before dropping over the next fall. But at the third waterfall, one of the friends made a small mistake that immediately turned into a terrifying situation. He misjudged his approach, got stuck in just a few inches of water right at the edge, and before anyone could reach him, he disappeared behind the curtain of the waterfall, completely out of sight.
Yes! Perfect. Oh my God. Yeah! Yeah, baby! Woo! Good plug, yeah.
Trapped behind the rushing water, he could no longer see or hear his friends. For the next 75 minutes, he tried again and again to paddle his way out, but every attempt was overpowered by the current. 15 times he fought against the water, blowing his whistle and trying to signal that he was still alive. On the other side, his friends were doing everything they could to reach him. They carried their boats back upstream, attempted different rescue strategies, and risked being pulled into the same trap themselves. Finally, one of them managed to find a narrow gap behind the waterfall curtain and make his way through to him. But even after they got him out, the nightmare still wasn't over. The group still had to climb a 35-foot vertical mud cliff, paddle another 45 minutes to the takeout point, and then hike a mile and a half through the dark. And as if the river itself hadn't already pushed them to the limit, They later realized they were being pursued by armed Zapatista rebels. Somehow, after everything that had happened, all 6 of them made it back to their village exhausted and shaken, but alive. And that is what makes this case so hard to forget. A single wrong line at the edge of a waterfall turned an ordinary descent into a 75-minute fight for survival, where his friends could hear his whistle, but for most of that time, they had no idea if they would ever be able to reach him. But the next accident is disturbing for a completely different reason, because this time, the danger didn't come from nature. It happened on a professional movie set, surrounded by people who were supposed to keep the scene under control. Sarah Jones was a 27-year-old camera assistant working on the set of Midnight Rider when an ordinary film shoot turned into a disaster no one on that crew was prepared for. The scene was supposed to be a dream sequence, with an actor playing Greg Allman lying in a hospital bed placed across active train tracks. At first, the crew appeared to be focused on getting the shot, but the danger became real the moment a train approached, and everyone suddenly realized they had almost no time to clear the tracks. There are 2 videos showing the terrifying final moments, one recorded from onboard the train, and another captured by the film crew in higher quality, showing people desperately trying to drag the hospital bed away before impact. What makes this footage so chilling is knowing that the clip ends just seconds before Sarah lost her life. The crew was not able to remove the bed in time, and when the train struck it, the impact sent part of the equipment back towards Sarah, pushing her into the path of the train. She was killed instantly. The scene had reportedly been considered too dangerous before, but the filmmakers went ahead with it anyway, and that decision turned a movie set into the site of a fatal accident. Director Randall Miller later pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to prison. And that is what makes this case so disturbing. This was not a freak accident in the middle of nowhere. It happened on a professional film set, surrounded by a crew, cameras, and people trying to make a scene look dramatic, only for the real danger to arrive faster than anyone could stop it. And while that case shows how quickly a planned production can turn deadly, the next one is terrifying because it happened in the open sky, where once something goes wrong, there is almost nowhere to escape. It all happened on May 23, 2026, high above the Austrian Alps. Everything looked calm. A 44-year-old woman named Sabrina was gliding through the mountains, suspended beneath her paraglider, with nothing around her but open sky, forest, and the sound of wind. From the outside, it looked almost peaceful, just another experienced paraglider enjoying a flight over one of the most beautiful places in Austria. But then, in the distance, something enters the frame. At first, it looks like a small plane simply passing through the mountains. It is still far enough away that you might not immediately realize how dangerous this is. But within seconds, the engine gets louder. The aircraft keeps moving closer, and the woman beneath the paraglider has almost no time to react. And then it happens. The plane flies straight into her paraglider. The propeller tears through the canopy above her, slicing into the one thing keeping her in the air. The lines twist, the fabric collapses, and in a single second, her peaceful flight turns into complete chaos. But Sabrina was carrying emergency equipment. Like many experienced paragliders, she had a reserve parachute with her. And in the middle of the spin, while falling through the air after being hit by the plane, she manages to deploy it, and manages to make an emergency landing on a forest road. And somehow, she survives with only bruises and minor injuries. The pilot, a 28-year-old man from Tyrol, later told police he could not avoid the collision in time. But investigators said that motorized aircraft are supposed to give way to unmotorized aircraft, and the case was later reported on suspicion of negligent bodily harm. After the video spread online, Sabrina posted about the accident herself. She thanked her reserve parachute, calling it her lifesaver. She also said she had not been flying somewhere she was not supposed to be, and that as a paraglider, you cannot simply avoid a small aircraft coming toward you. But even after everything that happened, Sabrina asked people not to attack the pilot online. And that detail makes the video even more unsettling, because she knew better than anyone how close this came to ending differently. One small delay, one failed reserve parachute, one slightly different landing area. And this would not have been a survival story. It would have been her final flight. But the next case is even more unsettling, because there was no storm, no aircraft collision, and no obvious danger around him. This time, the threat came from inside the driver's own body. On April 2, 2015, what started as a completely ordinary drive suddenly turned into a terrifying loss of control. The driver had no warning, no history of passing out, and no reason to believe anything was wrong. One moment, he was awake behind the wheel, driving like he had done countless times before. And the next, his body simply shut down. The last thing he remembered was switching off cruise control. But just seconds later, his car was no longer staying on the road. It began drifting away from the lane and heading straight toward disaster, while he was completely unconscious and unable to react. There was no chance to brake, no chance to steer, and no way for him to understand what was happening until it was already over. Somehow, he survived the crash, and doctors later discovered that the blackout had been caused by a medical condition he never knew he had. After treatment and recovery, his health stabilized, and the symptoms never returned. But what makes this case so unsettling is how fast everything changed. Just one quiet medical emergency behind the wheel, and within seconds, a normal drive became a moment he was lucky to survive. And if losing control without realizing it is terrifying, the next case is even worse, because the people inside knew exactly what was happening, but still couldn't stop it. Zorbing is supposed to be a harmless thrill ride. People climb inside a giant inflatable ball, strap themselves in, and roll down a hill or ski slope while the ball bounces safely along a controlled path. But in 2013, at the Dombai ski resort in Russia, that controlled path disappeared almost immediately. Two men were inside the ball when it suddenly veered off course, rolled past the area where it was supposed to stop, and began tumbling down the side of a mountain with no way for either of them to slow it down or escape. The video was filmed on a cell phone by a friend who could only stand there and watch as the ride turned into something far more dangerous.
Сейчас увидите. На! Держи его, блядь! Ох, блядь! О, нет! Да не укатится, нормально.
Да, остановится и все.
Об камень, давай об камень. Пиздец.
Kim var da içinde?
Блять, а там чё внизу? Ебать.
А кто это, чем вообще?
Я не знаю, под...
At one point, someone actually manages to get in front of the ball and briefly stop it. But the force behind it is too strong, and within seconds, it breaks free again. From there, the ball continues rolling almost a mile down the mountain, slamming into rocks as it picks up speed. By the time rescuers finally reached the two men inside, both were seriously injured and had to be rushed to the hospital. 27-year-old Denis Burakov suffered a severe spinal injury and died on the way there, while 33-year-old Vladimir Shcherbakov survived with a concussion and deep cuts to his arms and face. And that is what makes this footage so hard to watch. At the start, it looks like a simple tourist activity, the kind of thing people do for fun without thinking twice. But once the ball leaves the path, there is no steering, no braking, and no way for anyone outside to stop it before the mountain decides where it ends. But what you're about to see next brings that same feeling of helplessness back into the air, where one missing layer of protection changes everything. This next case is even more terrifying because once the paraglider was in the air, there was almost nothing protecting the people attached to it. In January 2022, in India, a paragliding pilot took a tourist up for what was supposed to be a normal ride. But within seconds, strong winds began pushing them off course, and the situation started changing faster than anyone on the ground could react. What first looked like a routine flight suddenly became a fight for survival, and the pilot's lack of preparation made everything even more dangerous. The pilot had taken off without a helmet and without a backup parachute, meaning that when the wind became too powerful, there was no real safety system left to rely on. As the paraglider was thrown into danger, the pilot reportedly tried to shield the tourist from the worst of the impact, but there was only so much he could do while completely exposed in the air. In the end, the pilot died, and the tourist was left severely injured. And that is what makes this footage so disturbing. Paragliding already depends on the weather, the equipment, and the decisions made before takeoff. But in this case, once the wind turned against them, the most important protections were missing, and by the time the danger became obvious, there was no way to undo that mistake. And the next one starts almost the same way, with a tourist activity that looks completely safe. But within seconds, the person in the air begins doing something no one expected. At first, this looked like a normal parasailing ride. A young woman was lifted above the water off the coast of Montenegro, with the beach behind her and the Adriatic Sea underneath her. From far away, nothing about the moment looked unusual. She was strapped into the harness, the parachute was open above her, and the boat was pulling her through the air like it had probably done many times before. But then, something changes. She starts moving strangely in the harness. At first, it is hard to see what she is doing, but then it becomes clear. She is trying to get out. She pulls at the equipment while still high above the water. The harness is the only thing keeping her attached, but she keeps trying to free herself. And within seconds, the situation becomes terrifying.
Možda nije mogla da diše. A možda nije bila jako visoka.
She slips out of the harness and falls straight into the sea below. The woman in the video was 19-year-old Tijana Radonjic from Serbia. She was on vacation in Montenegro when she was offered a parasailing ride near the beach. Witnesses later said she had shouted for them to put her down before the fall. Some believe she may have panicked in the air, but what exactly went through her mind in those final moments is still unclear. Emergency responders reached the area, but Tijana did not survive. What makes the video so disturbing is how quickly it changes. One moment, it looks like a normal tourist activity, and seconds later, she is falling from the sky. If that made you uncomfortable, the next accident is on another level, because this time, it is not just one person in danger, and the place where it happens makes escape almost impossible. On July 9, 2018, a Soviet-era Mi-8 helicopter was approaching the high-altitude South Inulchek base camp in Kyrgyzstan, a remote glacier camp below the 7,000-meter summit of Khan Tengri. The camp was filled with climbers waiting for supplies, tourists, and transport in one of the most isolated mountain regions in the country. That day, the helicopter was supposed to deliver fuel, food, and medicine to mountaineers, while also giving tourists a short high-altitude flight before bringing them back down. But as the aircraft came in toward the base camp, the situation suddenly started to change. What should have been a routine landing turned into a moment where everyone inside realized something was wrong. A sudden side gust slammed into the helicopter and forced it down hard onto the glacier. Inside the cabin, the passengers had no seatbelts, and as the aircraft hit the ground, the smell of fuel quickly filled the air. For a few seconds, nobody knew if the helicopter was about to explode. Everyone began scrambling to escape, knowing that if the fuel caught fire, there would be almost no chance of surviving in such a remote location.
Move, please. Move. Are you okay? No.
Somehow, all 15 people on board survived, but 6 were badly injured, and 1 woman was later left paralyzed. A second military helicopter had to be sent in to evacuate the most critical cases, while another aircraft from Kazakhstan arrived later for the remaining passengers. But the aftermath raised serious questions about why a military Mi-8 was being used as a tourist shuttle in such dangerous terrain, and why a country promoting itself as a mountaineering destination did not have a proper high-altitude rescue fleet ready for emergencies like this. What was supposed to be a short scenic flight became a reminder of how unforgiving these mountains can be when even one part of the plan goes wrong. But not every terrifying moment begins with a crash. The next one starts with laughter, sunshine, and a ride that looks fun, until the people in the air notice something below them. At first, Madison Rorex and her friends were just on vacation, choosing the kind of tourist activity that is supposed to feel exciting, but safe. They went parasailing, strapped into a harness as a parachute opened behind them, while a speedboat pulled them higher above the ocean. From the air, everything looked calm, and for a few moments, it was exactly the kind of memory people film because they want to remember it.
All right, ladies.
No! God.
Smile!
Don't think about one right! Oh my God, we're so high.
The girls were laughing, holding up their phones, and enjoying the view as they floated above the water. But then, while they were still high above the surface, they noticed something moving below them. At first, the shapes in the water were hard to understand, but the longer they looked, the more unsettling it became. Something was circling beneath them, and the girls were still attached to a parachute with no control over where they were going.
Can we look at the camera? There's a baby shark somewhere. Where? They said they saw one. No, stop. Shut up, you're freaking lying. I don't feel like my... That's a shark. That's a... Where? It's right there. Yes, it's right there. No, don't dip us in. Bro. Are you scared? Yes, I just saw a freaking baby shark and I don't feel secure. And if I fall, I'm going to get eaten by a shark.
Then the situation became much more frightening. The boat crew did what parasailing operators sometimes do for fun, slowing the boat down and lowering the chute so the riders dip closer to the water. But this time, Madison and her friends were being lowered directly toward the same area where the dark shapes had appeared. Within seconds, what had started as a fun vacation ride turned into a moment of panic as the girls realized they were being dropped closer and closer to shark-filled water.
Hey, don't drop me right here! That's a shark! That's a baby shark! There's sharks! Look, there's sharks! Oh my God! There's sharks! There's six! We're going down on the shark show! No! Don't get us in the water! Oh my God, I'm passing out. I'm passing out. I just passed out. Whoa. Shark! There's shark! Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Are you crazy? What's going
Thankfully, they made it back to the dock without being injured, but the fear in that moment was real. Their legs were shaking, their hearts were racing, and the shapes below were believed to be reef sharks, likely curious rather than aggressive. And from the water, we go back to land, where the next accident happens so fast that by the time anyone understands what they are seeing, the fall has already begun. On April 14, 2019, Adrian Owen was riding his off-road bike along the edge of a rugged quarry in Merthyr, Wales. At first, it looked like a normal ride through difficult terrain, the kind of place where one wrong move could be dangerous, but still seemed manageable. Then, in a heart-stopping moment, he lost control near the edge and plunged 40 feet down the cliff, with jagged rocks waiting below him. For a few seconds, it looked like there was almost no way anyone could survive a fall like that. Somehow, against all odds, Adrian survived. The Central Beacon's mountain rescue team rushed to the scene, and he was later airlifted to the hospital with serious injuries. But what makes this case so unsettling is how quickly everything changed. One moment, he was riding along the quarry edge, and the next, a small mistake had sent him over a drop that could have easily killed him. Adrian later described himself as lucky to be alive, and after watching how close that fall came to ending differently, it is hard to disagree. But the next case is different. This time, the danger is quiet, cramped, and hidden underground, and the only person who can reach it is not a firefighter. In April 2013, a 3-year-old boy named Gabriel had been trapped inside a narrow well for more than 11 hours. The shaft was around 49 feet deep and only 15 inches wide, so every normal rescue option had failed. Firefighters had tried to reach him, but the space was too tight for an adult, and standard equipment could not fit far enough down. For hours, the situation seemed almost impossible until a 14-year-old boy named Christian Marian Bacanu, who had just come home from school, stepped forward and offered to do what no one else could. With no rescue experience, only a headlamp for light, and barely enough room to move, Christian was lowered into the well head first, knowing that if anything went wrong, he would be trapped in the same darkness as the child he was trying to save. When Christian finally emerged from the narrow shaft, the crowd erupted. In his arms was Gabriel, alive and unharmed. What makes this rescue so incredible is that it came down to one teenager willing to go where trained adults physically could not. Christian was later celebrated with promises of awards, a tablet, a bicycle, and even a house, though many of those promises were never fulfilled. But more than a decade later, his life still followed the path that moment seemed to begin. He became Sergeant Major Christian Marian Bacanu, a professional firefighter and rescuer, turning one act of courage into a lifetime of service. He now has a family of his own, including a son, and remains the only civilian ever awarded the honorary emblem of Romania's General Inspectorate for Emergency Situations. Gabriel survived because, in the moment everyone else was running out of options, Christian was willing to go down alone. And while that rescue ended with relief, the next moment brings the fear back instantly, because sometimes the most dangerous accidents happen during something people do for fun every winter. Skiing is one of those sports that can look completely controlled right up until the moment it isn't. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people are injured in skiing-related accidents, and dozens lose their lives. The most common causes are brutally simple: hitting a tree, colliding with another rider, or going off a cliff where there is almost no chance to recover. And what makes it even more unsettling is that these accidents don't only happen on extreme slopes. Some happen on beginner-friendly trails, where people feel safer and have no idea how quickly one mistake can turn dangerous. The footage you're about to see shows just how fast a normal run can turn into something terrifying, and how little time someone has to react once they lose control.
Board. Nope. Okay. Oh shit! Oh, shit.
By some miracle, the men involved survived and went home with only broken bones. But that is what makes this so disturbing. This wasn't some impossible stunt or reckless trick gone wrong. It was an ordinary moment on the mountain where one wrong turn, one bad landing, or 1 second of lost control could have ended in a completely different way. But losing control does not only happen on a mountain. The next case starts with perfect weather, calm water, and a trip that looked safe until everything around them began to change. On May 29, 2014, a group of sailors left Santorini for what was supposed to be a perfect Mediterranean cruise. At first, nothing about the trip seemed dangerous. The sky was clear, the sea was calm, and everything around them looked like the kind of conditions sailors hope for. But out on open water, the weather can change faster than anyone expects, and within a short time, that peaceful trip began turning into a fight to keep the boat under control. A violent storm was building around them, bringing winds close to 70 knots, far stronger than anything they had been prepared for. To make it worse, their roller furling had already been jammed for days, meaning they could not control the sails the way they needed to. 2 other sailboats were racing for shelter, and the crew suddenly found themselves in the middle of a situation where one wrong decision could put them directly in the path of the storm. With almost no margin for error, they had to do whatever they could to stop the boat from being overwhelmed.
It's tangled.
Strangely, the torn sails ended up helping them. Because the sails were damaged, the boat had less surface exposed to the violent wind, giving them just enough control to slip behind a nearby island. Only then were they finally able to call for help, and a rescue boat came to get them. What makes this footage so unsettling is how quickly the situation went from calm to dangerous. And if that storm felt intense, the next clip is the opposite. It is short, quiet, and almost over before the person filming realizes how close he came. In May 2010, a railway enthusiast at Thurston Station in Suffolk, England, came terrifyingly close to losing his life. At first, he seemed completely focused on his camcorder, trying to capture the train passing through the station. But while he was looking in one direction, a modern intercity express train was racing toward him from the opposite side at nearly 70 miles per hour. By the time he realized how close it was, there was almost no time to react. The train missed him by just inches, and even the force of the air rushing past him could have been enough to knock him off balance or pull him toward the tracks. British Transport Police later confirmed that if he had been standing even slightly closer, the encounter would almost certainly have ended in death or catastrophic injury. But surviving by inches is one thing. The next accident gives people much more warning and somehow still reaches the point where there is almost nothing left to do.
It's getting bad. This is getting very bad.
This was supposed to be a routine test flight, not the final flight for the people on board. On July 10, 2018, a vintage Convair CV340 took off from Pretoria, South Africa, while the aircraft was being prepared for delivery to the Aviodrome Aviation Museum in the Netherlands. At first, it looked like another controlled departure, but shortly after takeoff, something went seriously wrong. An engine fire broke out, smoke began trailing from the aircraft, and inside the cabin, everyone suddenly realized the plane might not make it back safely.
Quicker than it's trying to. This is getting bad.
It's getting worse?
This is getting very bad. Oh, here, low battery. Can you? Cut. Soos jy dan kan maak. Yes, dis gaan bad wees.
The pilots tried to turn back toward the airport, but the aircraft could no longer maintain altitude. As it continued losing height, the situation moved past the point of recovery, and the plane crashed into a factory about 6 kilometers from the runway. 2 people were killed, a flight engineer on board and a person on the ground, while both Australian pilots and several passengers were seriously injured. Later investigations found that the crash was not caused by one single failure, but by a chain of mistakes and missed warnings, including maintenance problems, poor cockpit coordination, ignored emergency checklists, an unused fire extinguishing system, and engine damage that had been misdiagnosed before the flight. And that is what makes this case so disturbing. The danger did not appear out of nowhere. It had been building before the aircraft even left the ground, and once the engine caught fire in the air, every missed decision became part of a disaster no one on board could escape from. And now, we're at the final accident. If you found the others disturbing, this one is the hardest to shake, because it begins with a moment that was supposed to be unforgettable for a completely different reason. It was the day Rosemary do Nascimento Silva had been waiting for her whole life. She'd always dreamed of making a big, unforgettable surprise entrance on her wedding day, and now that moment had finally come. To surprise her fiancé, she hired a helicopter to fly her straight to the venue, just outside São Paulo. It was all meant to be magical, but what no one knew was that this special day was about to take a turn, and the dream Rosemary had held onto for so long wouldn't end the way she hoped. Everything seemed to be going perfect. Rosemary, her brother, the pilot, and a photographer, who was 6 months pregnant, boarded the helicopter full of excitement and cheer. Rosemary couldn't stop smiling. As the helicopter lifted off, the photographer set the camera to record every single moment. Everyone was in high spirits, imagining how unforgettable this entrance was going to be. The photographer captured all of the reactions and the cinematic views, but just as they were only about 2 kilometers away from the venue, flying over a stretch of jungle and surrounded by a thick layer of fog, things suddenly changed. Without warning, the helicopter started acting strange. It started shaking vigorously, and within a moment, everything went dark, and it was all captured on camera. Watch. The helicopter that was meant to land with cheers and celebration instead crashed, leaving behind heartbreak and shock. Tragically, none of them survived. The bride never got to say, "I do." Her brother never got to walk her down the aisle. And the photographer, who had come to capture the happiest day of her life, never got to take a single photo at the ceremony. It's a harsh reminder that even on days when you least expect it, things can quickly spiral into a horrific and unfortunately deadly turn. That's all for today, folks. If you want to see more creepy content, click on the video on your screen.